Hey everyone, what's going on? Welcome back to Ledger Talk, where each and every week, around each and every week, sorry, we've been taking very random breaks. I bring you a topic where I want to talk about with you guys for about 10 or so minutes if you have the time. Anyway, so this week, as the title says, is there really a divide between Marvel Studios and Marvel Television? So what I mean by that is that everyone knows of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and how awesome it's been that this idea that Kevin Feige had, to make a shared film universe across multiple different franchises coming together, culminating in Avengers films or mini team-ups or something like that, exists. And now we have TV shows to kind of build more of that world, expand it a little bit. And I've been happy about it. But, of course, obviously, especially after Infinity War and then now even with Avengers 4 coming out, if the title and the trailer comes out as soon as this is posted, I swear to God, I'm going to be freaking jealous, future Joe and future audience members. Anyway, one of the common criticisms many fans have, is that Marvel, the movies, are not acknowledging the TV shows, because the phrase is, it's all connected. And when we started the whole TV endeavor back in 2013 with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was such a concrete part of the MCU. You had Nick Fury, you had Maria Hill, you had Sif, you had all these major tie-ins to the show from the movies. And it was like you get to experience, in a way, what happens after the movie's over. How do the ramifications of those movies affect it? And eventually, as the seasons went on, they just started to become more and more discombobulated. They weren't really tying into the larger picture anymore. They had minor tie-ins, but it wasn't like, I think after Civil War, it wasn't like anything big anymore, because they were so now independent to creating their own stories, which is great, but I feel like fans have missed the aspects of having these movies and TV shows firmly connected. And of course, obviously, many people want to see the Defenders. They want to see Phil Coulson. They want to see The Runaways, Cloak and Dagger on the big screen. And I want to too. I would love for Daredevil to meet Tony Stark. I would love for Luke Cage to get throw down with the Hulk. I would love that. But obviously, when it comes to the topic of why hasn't the show and the movies work so connectively anymore, well, so I'll give you a little bit of a background history. So when the whole television initiative started, when the Marvel Studios was still in Phase 2, there was a bit of more control by a different person. So I think his name was Ike Paramount. I think I got the name right for once in my life. He's key to this whole thing. So when Marvel Studios was becoming a thing, obviously there was some oversight by some higher-ups at Marvel in general as a company, in the entertainment company. So Marvel Entertainment and Marvel Studios are two different things, I presume. Like they're still making live action media, but they're both their own entities, if you know what I mean. So for a while in Phase 2, and then going into Phase 3, so around that time frame, the end of Phase 2, beginning of Phase 3, and a little bit into the beginning of Phase 2, there was a lot more. A lot of people say that Phase 2 was kind of a weird misstep in the MCU. It was something that some decisions were very sketchy, like the Iron Man 3 decision, with the twist. There was the Ant-Man, the original director's removal. There was the Age of Ultron infamous, scenes cutting out to set up future films, all that sort of stuff. And eventually forcing the Inhumans supposedly as a movie, despite Feige not wanting to, didn't even believe. These are all speculations, and none of these are confirmed. There's some solid evidence to support them, but nothing has ever been confirmed. Anyway, so when that happened, obviously Martin had the television studio and the studios under lock and key. But then eventually, once the films started wanting to do more creative things, like, so one thing was, for Civil War, it wasn't going to happen because supposedly Paramount said they didn't want to pay more money to Robert Downey Jr. to do a Captain America film. They wanted to keep Captain America down, similar to Winter Soldier. But that was a creative, that was a no-no. They needed to tell this story, and thank God they told that story. And apparently Paramount didn't want that to happen. And that sucks. It's like, all you care about is money, and thankfully he's gone from the studio's picture. And I honestly believe the movies have been so much more better than Phase 2. I think that's a general statement to say. That's a good thing to say. Like, yes, without him, the movies have thrived better. The Inhumans did suffer, sadly. Check out last year's video about the whole Scott Buck thing to know more about that. But it did suck. But it was like, well, at least the other films did, were managed to still have the same quality and even better quality of caliber. But now it's tying back to this whole thing, with the whole divide thing. Marvel Entertainment, so Kevin Feige didn't want to report to Paramount anymore. He didn't. He didn't like him in the respect of, he's hindering the creative decision. And I think I could attest to it. We would have all loved to see what Edgar Wright would have done with Ant. We would have loved to see the true, unaltered Joss Whedon cut of Age of Ultron. We would have loved to see them. But sadly, they didn't happen. I am not to say Age of Ultron did its purpose. Ant-Man was still a good film. That's what we have to live with. But it was still been interesting to see how that set of history would have went. Anyway, Feige wanted out with Paramount. He wanted to report straight to Disney. Because obviously Disney owns Marvel, so obviously it would stand the reason hey, I don't want to report to this guy, let me just report to you directly. And they said, yeah, sure, go ahead. So now Marvel Studios goes to Disney in terms of creative decisions, and they allow everything. And thus, now we're here in this grand process of Avengers 4, Captain Marvel, Far From Home coming out next year, which I'm really hyped for. But however, Paramount still controls a little bit of the television division. And obviously, since they're no longer, there's no communication, because I remember the first 2 seasons and a half of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. just to use as a reference point, since that was the show that was a weekly format compared to the others. That was more of the what happens after the movies. So it was okay, you knew about the movies, but you didn't get to know fully. You don't get the constant communication as the early days. And it's kind of a weird trade-off. The early days were so great in the MCU connections, but the stories were a little bit weak, and now the stories are so much better, but they are more looser and lesser with the connection. They're more of the internal TV world than acknowledging with the movie. Like the Netflix shows, they have yet to acknowledge the events of Sokovia. They have yet to acknowledge the events of Infinity War. They're so far behind on the timeline because they don't want to be constricted about, okay, how does Daredevil Season 4 be affected by Infinity War? That's not the intention there. And that does suck. And it's well, why didn't the Defenders do anything to help out in the Thanos crisis? Because shit happens, and we will probably never get to those answers for many years, if we do get answers, and that does suck. I remember back in the early days of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. where it was when the cast got the word, they got to see Winter Soldier, and obviously if you remember what happened in Winter Soldier, it kind of blew everything up. It blew the foundation of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. as a whole, and it managed to revamp things halfway into its first season. So it was wow, that happened, and now we get to pick up with that. That was by far the best MCU movie to TV show connection ever made. I'm being completely honest. That was the best. Now after that, it was well, Age of Ultron did its best, but it was kind of not really canon. And then it was now past Civil War, it's well, we know what's happening, it's just they don't want to do anything. And it's it's not that they don't want to do anything, it's because the movies are made so much slower than the TV show. So when, let's say, Infinity War was being filmed, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Season 4 was happening, and and Infinity War wasn't going to come out until Season 5 of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. So how the hell were any of them supposed to know what was going to happen? Obviously not, so it's kind of hard, and it's well, why don't you bring the TV characters into the movies? Well, that's a good thing, right? Well, sadly, what happens if that character dies in the next season of that show? And it's well, oh shit, we're way behind the timeline. We didn't know anything. And sometimes the writers, they can't be constricted to okay, we give you this character, then you have to keep them alive until, but maybe that affects another decision the show wants to do. It's well, now we have to change things. And that kind of now hinders the creative decisions. And I did hear the Russo brothers at one point in Infinity War's development, they did want to have the Netflix heroes in there. It was just two reasons. One, how do we make it work that satisfies the fans? Second of all, are all the fans even going to recognize these characters? Because yes, there are fans who don't even watch any of the TV shows. They do exist. So if you're satisfying them, like, well, what do I get out of it? I don't know these characters. I don't want to pay for Netflix. I don't want to pay for cable TV. I don't even want to watch TV in general. So what is my payoff? Why are these characters wasting the screen time for other characters just to satisfy this small percentage of people? And that's fine. That's understandable. But it does also suck. Like, well, what about those fans? I mean, the fans who truly watch everything. I'm not even that fan. I haven't even watched Runaways yet, and I want to watch Runaways. I just don't want to pay for Hulu right now. I'm just waiting until eventually it comes out on DVD, or eventually I do have to get Hulu. So even in that front, like, I agree. Like, if the Runaways were picked for whatever reason to be in an MCU movie, if a cameo or a small role, I wouldn't understand. And maybe it'll entice me to go see the show, maybe, but sometimes, like, the production quality is different. Obviously, these are big scam movies. These are small TV shows with smaller budgets, that sort of thing. But I guess, to go back to the question, is there a divide? Well, yes and no. Yes, they're not working closely anymore, which does suck. It does affect not the quality of the shows. It does affect the fact, like, is it really all connected? I remember there was an interview with S.H.I.E.L.D. star Chloe Bennett about the whole it's all connected, and she kind of, I don't remember if she roasted them, but she wasn't happy about the whole thing, like they're not really connected anymore, because it's like there's no indication that they were going to be in the movie, or the movie was going to make reference to them. There isn't, and I understand that, because the movie has to do what it has to do, and sometimes they don't have the time to work in an Easter egg or even a reference towards that, and it does suck. It really does suck, because I remember when Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. started, it's like, there was all these graph on, like, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. could eventually spawn off to their own movie, get those actors to a movie. And that was an awesome idea at the time, but obviously, you know, things change, the ratings go down, people aren't invested in the TV side anymore, and that does happen. It really does suck, but that's the way the business works. Like for Marvel Studios, the priority is making the movies the best they can be. They can't focus on making every individual TV show work with that function. And now we're getting into a new territory of this discussion, is that by this time next year, we will have the Marvel Studio TV shows. Now, what is that going to entitle? If you don't know what I'm talking about, is that, well, Disney is making their own streaming service called Disney Plus. And they're going to have a whole line of exclusive Marvel shows on there. And what we're reportedly hearing is that it's going to be the closest we're going to get from a Marvel Studios level of content to the television scale, with Kevin Feige overseeing. There's a Loki show in the work, there's a Scarlet Witch show in the work, and there's a Falcon Winter Soldier team-up film in the work. Those sound awesome idea. I want to see those shows, but now what do we have to say with the other television shows? Do they just not matter anymore to the studios? And then that sucks. So now the argument's again on that discussion. Like, do we have to watch those shows to understand those characters when they pop up back in the movie? Do we have to now pay for Disney Plus so we can understand those characters' journeys? We don't know. And I'm going to be interested to see how this discussion evolves further when those shows come out. Like, so now there's 3 degrees of the MCU. There's the movies, the studio TV shows, and the regular TV shows. How does that all work? So now it's like, well, the studio TV shows are technically the legit ones, so not the other ones, so I can skip those, and then those people are like, no, you can watch it. We're still in the same universe, but it's like, well, you guys aren't being, employed or being controlled by Marvel Studios, so why do you even matter? And that does suck. I love all these shows. I mean, Inhumans aside, but it does suck that, this is the way things are now, and I do hope someday maybe the Marvel Studio TV show will reinvigorate, like, no, they all matter. Just because one is not run by the other doesn't mean they're all bad. Besides Iron Fist 1 and Inhumans, everything else is good. They're watchable or great. I don't know. I really do hope things get better with Marvel Studios and Marvel TV. I want to go back to the early days of the television day. I do want to. I want to see more connections. I want to still have the same stories we've been getting recently, but just adding a little bit more flavor towards the connections. That's all I really want. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching my rambling once again. Please subscribe if you haven't. Please like and share this video if you want to. Please favorite it. Please don't do anything sexually explicit with this video. And I'll see you guys soon. And the last thing I know of this note is that rest in peace, Stanley. We all miss you.